Welcome to the upstreamlife.com. I'm your host and founder, Vishal Krishna. Today, I have with me Abhay Tandon, an innovation and transformation leader, who is also the head of innovation and AI at TVS Motor Company. He has been in the industry long enough, the startup industry, to tell you what has happened in India and what's going to happen. He is also the co-founder of 321 Capital. He'll tell us about that. If you ask around, Abhay has worked with some big corporate and has helped them transform their startup ecosystem. Okay, he's worked with Lowe's, he's worked with Target India, and AB InBev, of course. I've known him through all these places that he's worked in. Accelerators. Let me set the context. Accelerators in the startup world play a very vital role. Okay, especially corporate accelerators. They play a vital role because startups have to be guided into the corporate deep end. It's very difficult to work in the ocean out there, and corporate accelerators allow startups to understand the processes in that ecosystem. But here is the catch. Corporate accelerators of foreign origin have not been a mega success in India. In fact, they have struggled. Abhay knows it all. Abhay knows the ecosystem well enough to tell us why an Indian accelerator or Indian corporate accelerator makes all the difference. And he's also going to tell us much more about where the startup world is going. Obviously, he's an angel investor. He's going to talk about that too. Abhay, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, not just because you're a friend, but you've also transformed a lot of people's lives in the startup ecosystem. How are you?
Thank you so much, Vishal, and you've been super kind in the introduction. I'm glad if you think so, and I'm gonna be hopeful that that we continue to make impact in the lives of people as we go forward as well.
Let's start off in the early days. I think both of us are startup enablers in a way. We met at that point of time when the Indian startup ecosystem was just about thinking about its third or fourth unicorn. You get what I'm saying? Around 14, 15. How has your life as a startup enabler been? Why did you make that choice? It's conscious that it just fell on your plate, or was it starting off at a corporate job and then this happened suddenly?
So Vishal, I think if I go back 10 years, recession hit France, I was in Paris, came back to India, and accidentally landed a job in a venture capital environment, right? So the journey started from there. That something deep down inside of me always said a very cliched thing to me, which was, how do I create an impact in the lives of millions of people in a positive way, right? So back in the day, and I'm talking about 2012, 2013 timeframe, when venture capital in India was more around financial capital, and I was playing the role of a scout. I was also, looking at an IB model as well, to work with startups, build their investment memorandums. At the end of the day, because it was only financial capital, I was not really satisfied in terms of, what's the impact that we're really creating, right? It was not strategic capital as we look at it today, or over the last 5 years, how it's evolved. But then that made me think that, maybe I do not want to stick to venture capital at that point of time. And I took a plunge in a startup environment, right? I joined a startup. While the startup was solving for problems, it was still not giving me the satisfaction at the end of the day that I'm creating impact, right? Because startups in many cases are bound by capital that they get to really innovate, right? And sometimes things work out. They're looking at the KPIs that VC set for them, and they're on the road to just meet those KPIs and not really innovate as much, right? After the initial innovation. So again, the thought process came, and I said, okay, this is not me. This is what am I really doing in my life, right? This doesn't let me sleep at night very comfortably. I do sleep, but not very comfortably. So that's where after VC and startup, I thought that, okay, who can pay me money to innovate? And that's where corporate innovation happened. Coincidentally, one of my dear old friends and our friends, Ravi Santani, spoke to me about Target Accelerator. I joined the strategy and innovation team at Target, which, got me into corporate innovation and working a lot more with startups to develop innovative solutions, right? And as this went along, I realized that, it's not just about innovation, unless you develop the whole ecosystem together with you, right? It's not just about one corporate, it's not just about one VC or one startup, right? It's all of them coming together with industrial bodies, with a lot of other players coming together. And coincidentally, at that point of time, I realized that, my role allowed me to develop the ecosystem as well. So, the thing that has been my passion is also paying me for that, right? So I was like, okay, it can't get better, right? The ikigai feeling of sorts at that point of time, and I didn't even know the word. So that's where I started working closely with startups and trying to bring about changes in a way that corporates and startups work together, right? And I think that is where the journey of enablement started for me. And it's been going on in different formats since then. Startup corporate relationships is one of them. I realize investments is another one of them. Needs to be disrupted in the way we look at investments, partnerships, and so on and so forth.
I want you to define the word enabler, because a lot of people don't realize the importance of being an enabler or the bridge, right? We sometimes call ourselves the bridge to many things. You and I have been a bridge to many. You more so. I'm more so in the media side. You more so in the corporate side, which is even more important. A lot of people believe, you know, enabling doesn't add value, but I keep telling people that enabling is not just matching two people together. It's much more. So perhaps let's set that in context, right, Abhay?
Sure. So, there are different definitions of enabler when I look at it theoretically, right? But in my head, enabler is a person who, like you said, bridges the gap between two or multimodal points, right? And, builds that ecosystem around it, which is efficient and smooth functioning, right? Now, there's also an overlap with another term, which is catalyst. So catalyst is the one which catalyzes or initiates the change, and enabler is the one which scales that change across the body, right? And I think that both of them work very closely hand in hand. In fact, an analogy to that is something that I once heard, which is the clog, and lightning rod example, right? A cog of a watch, right, which continuously moves, and only because of that the whole work happens, right? Or gets moving. The progress happens because there's so many cogs which continuously move in the operations of it to really move things forward. And at the same time, there's a lightning rod, whose job is to strike that enthusiasm or energy and vision to propel things in a different direction, right? And I think only when both of them come together does the machinery work effectively, right? So some of us, people like you and I, wear both the hats of a clog, which is a combination of a cog and a lightning rod, to make sure that those changes that we are trying to implement, first we suggest those changes, and second is we implement those changes as well. And that is how it works in this ecosystem, where you try to move towards building an ecosystem which is tending towards perfect competition, where which is an ideal state in my head. When you have enough efficiency in the whole play, the things can move forward a lot more effectively, and then that it's not a zero sum game. Then you everyone wins in that scenario. But of course, like you mentioned, sorry, I just mentioned when you said that it's also a challenge, and the challenge there that you mentioned about people misconceive, or they have the wrong conception about the word enabler. And that's also because there have been very interesting people in the scenario who have misused the word enabler, and enabler after that lost its value. People sometimes think, hey, listen, I rather not call myself an enabler, because the moment I do so, I'll be kind of linked with some of those miscreants in the ecosystem, right? And at the same time, it's also become a jargon, like ecosystem and enabler has become jargons today.
No, I'm glad you set that in perspective. I've been looking at your career for a while, and the way you moved, to corporate accelerators. I'm not going to name them because the next set of questions that follow will be a little harder for them to digest. I wanted your perception on corporate accelerators. Why have they not taken off in India in a very big way? I hear Reliance acquires so many more startups. I hear Baiju's acquiring a lot more startups, but I don't see any of these international ones acquiring anything or showing the way. It's almost like this. In my last 1 year as a startup founder in the media side, I have seen, the global accelerators do one or two things. One is do PR, good PR. They do encourage good kids or senior people to come and become startup founders, and obviously they get some form of seed funding. What I don't see through is the follow-up or the large acquisitions, because I'm tracking this for the last 8-9 years now. I haven't seen big deals happening. I want your honest thoughts here because we are setting perspective on what can change. At least I hope somebody listening to this in the corporate accelerator side, at least the global ones in India, use this as a knowledge piece or a platform to set up something where they can make India a go-to place to acquire not just talent, but also products.
For sure. So I look at it, let's take a step back and understand the objectives of corporate innovation in the first place, right? So everyone started off, at least in India, thinking that, this will be our ticket to attracting good talent. Because the fancy term in town in India in 2013, 2012 was startups, right? And that meant disruption, that meant innovation. So, let's do something to attract talent. And I'm probably going to be killed after being so candid about this. But I think the first point, the inflection point was let's attract the right talent. For that, let's talk to the media that, we are starting a program where we're going to be incubating and accelerating startups to do something meaningful, which will allow corporates to generate good ideas and solve for their problems as well, right? There was a phase where a lot of accelerators, corporate accelerators, started thinking about this as a fad. That hey, listen, we need to have one too. Whether they have dedicated budget associated with that, whether they have the processes and the internal buy-ins for that, or the overall innovative culture as a thought process or a mindset, right? To really be able to apply that innovation that they co-develop or they bring in from startups and then deploy it at scale, right? Without these things also, people started this and that became a major challenging point. Some corporates continue to go through that route and they kept evolving through the maturity curve of the corporate innovation or corporate startup accelerators, right? Corporate accelerators. Now, when we talk about global ones and Indian ones, I would rather subdivide the globals into global corporates having presence in India with consumers in India versus global corporates who are just having GCC presence in India, right? And that's a major distinguishing factor because, for example, if you look at companies like Google, Amazon, Honeywell, Intel, others, right? They are making impact through their accelerator programs in India. They're acquiring startups, they're investing in startups. Is GCCs which are lagging behind because at the end of the day, there are two or three fundamental problems there. They are trying to tap into Indian innovation potential because you know what? A lot of Indian challenges that we're facing in India or Asia today would be challenges that the West faces 10 years from now, right? So they're trying to get ahead of the curve. That is the intent. But when they actually go on the ground to deploy this, the buy-ins from the so-called mothership or the headquarters is not really there, right? People have been speaking about the seat on the table for so long. How many leaders from India do we see having a real strong seat on the table in a global scenario? I mean, one such person that I know of and I really admire is Navneet Kapoor, who is now at the board of Maersk, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen him all these years grow, right? And what a fantastic role model to have in my head, at least, that he's really having a very strong presence at a global level. And he's been able to tap into innovation. Maersk has been a very, very strong example of that, right? Where they have been a global company, but they have been able to tap into innovation. The second thing is the product innovation bit. Why not product innovation? Now, because they don't have consumers in India, one of my problems with the GCC environment was that the consumers are sitting out of, let's say, US or Europe. Sitting out of India, I do not know the underlying consumer trends as well as I should know. And who do I go to for that? I go to the consumer insights team. Consumer insights team is very biased towards the business scenarios. They are trying to just look at the top line and bottom line impact. The problem there is the first lens should not be the business lens. The first lens should be the consumer lens. And because you're thinking of outsourcing innovation and looking at sourcing insights from the consumer insights team, you can never really solve for product innovation challenges, right? So, for example, in my previous organization, we partnered with American Association for Retired People. The TG was elderly. Now, if I would have just looked at our consumer insights team, they would have given me very biased insights or problem statements. So we partnered with the right association, which gave us an opportunity to interact with a lot of elderly. that got us a lot of insights into what consumers are really thinking, what are the problem statements that we can synthesize out of that, and then attack from a product innovation lens, right? So that's a second challenge that GCCs are not able to take a call. And the third, of course, is the perception about India as a market, right? While that is changing globally, you're calling from a GIC to a capability center now, there's still question in the minds of most stakeholders in the global markets that, why should we pay X amount of money for an acquisition? Why can't we afford it at 1/10 the price? Come on, I mean, this is ridiculous now. Very honestly, where I get very infuriated, because for me, I'm a very patriotic person. And I like, hey, listen, Indians are building some of the best products globally. Zoho is a fantastic example. You've seen so many others, right? And we're solving for ground level innovation to some of the top notch innovations in the world, right? Which is creating major impact. It's expected to happen at a very low cost. Why? So that thought process needs to change. Only when the thought process changes will you actually be able to really drive product innovation as well as larger impact from the Indian innovation potential.
Yeah, that's so well laid out. I think you're right that I think ABB did a good thing by acquiring Numosity recently, and that was a good one. I think Airtel picked up stake in Level Networks. That was a good one too. I think you're right. I think you're right. You're saying you have to set the context right in terms of what you really need as a product nation from India, right? You can't go to your consumer insights team and then have biased opinions on things. Very well said. Let's talk about that patriotism side that you mentioned. You moved to TVS recently, and you're head of innovation there and AI. How different is it working with an Indian accelerator? What are your thoughts on the role, and what are you going to call for? I'm really curious. I want to see some good startups do telematics. I want to do something in ABS. ABS is big. I mean, can we do cloudification of a bike? Electric vehicles. There's so much that can happen. So your quick thoughts on this, please.
Sure. So one of there are a couple of reasons, Vishal, to be honest, when I thought about moving to TVS, right? The first thought was that, like you mentioned, that, when you're really trying to do product innovation, you need to understand consumers very, very well, right? And I wanted to work for an Indian conglomerate because I've never done that. Now, TVS has presence in 85 countries, so it's a global company, it's a global conglomerate, but with Indian roots and origins, right? Headquartered out of Chennai, we have plants in Hosur, we have a very strong digital office and sales and marketing office in Bangalore and Koramangala, right? And presence in 85 countries. So we are global in that way, but we're also Indian, right? And that was exciting for me because then I could interface. Like, for example, 200 meters away or 300 meters away from my home, I walk into a TVS dealership and I explore firsthand what is the kind of dealership experience I get. What are the other consumers doing? How are they interfacing with our products, right? And so on and so forth. Second thing was that, there's an actual impact happening, right? Now, most companies would have certain impact on consumerism, right? You increase consumerism, but it's not just about that. You're talking about safety. In a world where fires in EVs are happening every now and then, how do you create safe product which will not just be for a utility of point A to point B for a consumer? This will be really solving a lot of challenges for consumers while they travel, with every minute of their time being spent in the most meaningful way, right? So it's not just about utility, it's now about mobility. And that could be a very interesting angle for me, before taking the TVS role, that I was thinking in my head that, because TVS is going through a humongous amount of transformation, this would be a fantastic place for me to be at and be a part of that journey where, we are going to create impact across the globe from India, right? An Indian company creating a very, very positive impact across the globe, right? And a lot of countries where you don't think about having a lot of good vehicles out there, right? Be it two-wheelers or three-wheelers as well, right? And, globally, TVS has a 5.5% market share, right? Which is about 6 bikes out of 100 are TVS bikes across the globe. And that's the scale I'm talking about. So it felt good to be a part of that. And second thing is, in an Indian company, what I've realized is that decision making is quicker because the headquarters is in India. There's no glass ceiling as well, right? So, in a lot of global corporates, I have noticed that their glass ceilings, unless you really shift to the headquarters, you don't get the growth that you deserve. It becomes much more difficult. I'm not saying that you don't get it, but it becomes much more difficult, and be it because of your ethnicity, because of your color, because of your location, and so on and so forth, right? So those challenges happen, and I thought that work in an Indian environment where the company is really moving forward and progressing forward very, very quickly, it would be a good opportunity for me to now work from India for an Indian conglomerate which is global in nature and create impact globally. So my larger vision, if you remember, the thing that kept bothering me, can I really create impact in the lives of millions of people in a positive way? Can that be fulfilled here? Yes, it can. So that is where TVS happened.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, TVS exports 1 million units to 80 countries. And that's the power that you're talking about. And that's what we wants to be part of. I like the fact that you brought in there's impact everywhere. You could do EVs. You could call for impact on telematics software. You could call for cloudification of cars. I mean everything. I mean, I'm talking about cloudification. When I say cars, it's also two wheelers. You're talking about an entire stack of mobility, and that's what's going to come about. Any sneak peek into what's going to happen? You're going to launch an accelerator uh, program for startups soon, or you want to tell us that?
Sure. So TVS at large and TVS Motor specifically also has been working with a lot of startups already. In fact, if you see the news articles, there have been a lot of investments and acquisitions at a global level as well. We have been acquiring companies and startups globally, and we've been investing in a lot of startups in India and globally as well, right? So that will continue to happen. We're working towards creating a more structured program, to work with startups of different stages, different sizes to, meet strategic objectives. Uh, I will not be able to comment on the exact timeline, but yes, it should happen soon that, we'll be coming out with some announcements around how do we want to structure that and how do we start working with startups. But in the meanwhile, while the structure is not out there yet, we still continue to work with startups across different technology segments, right? I know internal stakeholders who, without my coming in as well, have already been exploring and working with startups in blockchain, IoT, and all sorts of nanotech and what kind of emerging technologies out there, building neural nets and all amazing technologies coming together to really solve for challenges, and also getting a very strong environment to test their solutions out. So this is not something new, but what I would say is that, there are not a lot of auto companies out there, in India at least, who are doing that, who are giving a very good playground for startups to test their, or validating ground for startups to validate the solutions in, right? And we have been doing that without a formal structure, so to say, but that will come soon too.
I love the fact that you said they're investing in a lot of startups, and one of them that comes to mind is Ultraviolet. Guys, if you go check out the YouTube videos on how Ultraviolet's testing their you can call it super bike. It's a fast electric bike. The amount of work that's going into it is nothing short of science. It's proper science, hard science in action. That's going to come out soon, and obviously TVS is going to tell you more about that later. And I'm going to keep a tab on Abhay for more announcements. Okay, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Abhay, I really want to know your role as a syndicate angel investor at this point in time. You've launched your own syndication. It's 321 Capital. Tell us a little bit about that quickly, and how many startups have you invested in? What's the thesis?
Sure. So, Vishal, it's called 3 to 1 capital because what we wanted to signify from 3 to 1 were 2 points, right? One is, the whole thing about 3, 2, 1 and go, right? Let's move forward and, pick up speed, right? That was one. But the second more important one was that, there are three types of capital, be it human capital, financial capital, and intellectual capital, all coming together to form entrepreneurial capital. So we wanted to give this message out to the startups that, when we invest money in you, it's not the financial investment alone or the financial capital alone, it's the entrepreneurial capital where we'll work with you across the journey to help you scale your operation and create the impact. Which brings me to the thesis, right? We basically wanted to invest in smart founders who are audacious enough to create a positive impact or to build the future, right? So again, this kind of links back with my original thought process as well as those of my other two partners, Amit Mishra and Abhay Mishra, my partners in crime while we run the syndicate, that we just don't want to invest in founders, because when you invest early on, you're investing in founders and their vision, right? We wanted to invest in those kind of smart, audacious founders who can really build their future. So thereby, most of our deals are going to happen in the emerging tech space early on in their careers. In some cases, early on in their journey. In some cases, of course, doubling down as well. And through the syndicate, we have invested in 3 startups so far. And because we've just started this journey 3 months, 3 to 4 months into the syndication, and very very consciously decided to do about a deal a month, primarily because we are not in a rat race to just invest in any and every startup. We are going to be very very conscious about the kind of startups that we invest in, innovative startups really creating an impact, and making sure that we are able to do justice to them as well, right? It's not just financial capital, right? That we are hoping for an ROI on that. If we invest in them, we have to do justice to the startup, guide them, be on their boards, and so on and so forth. And for that to happen, then we need to be picky about the kind of startups that we can contribute to. And in my personal capacity, Vishal, as an angel investor, including with the syndicate, I've done 24 investments directly and indirectly.
Okay, nice. So the structure is it's syndication. You put in money along with your partners, of course. Also, there's a syndicate money. It's run like a fund. Would it run like a fund at all?
So it's going via AngelList right now. It is. Think of it as a SPV fund, which is doing that. We're also thinking of launching a micro fund of our own as well. Hopefully, between $5 to $10 million in the near future. That will allow more ease of timelines, right? That once we do a thorough due diligence of, let's say, 15 days, 20 days, then it becomes very easy for us to then initiate the transfer, considering that it's our own fund. So that is where we're thinking of that. But yeah, think of this as a angel fund of sorts that allows us to create an SPV and transfer the fund.
Okay, you will obviously, when you go to that 5 to 10 million range, you will apply for a SEBI license, of course, and that's what you want to do. That's the journey. And today it's a 3-member team, your syndicate team.
Yeah? Yes, it's a 3-member team. Yeah.
3-member team. I also want to know the names of the startups that you've invested in.
Sure. I can announce the first one and the second one. The third one is yet to announce, right? So the first one is called Sanfe. Sanfe is into women healthcare and hygiene products. In fact, by the time we release the podcast, we should have that in the news as well, that Sanfe has touched 100 crore ARR, right? So that's a fantastic milestone to achieve with them. I'm at a very strong multiple. I've doubled down with them through my syndicate. The previous investment happened almost 15 months back, and then about 3 months back, 12 months after the first investment, we invested close to about 2.5 CR in them as well. So that was doubling down and my way of showcasing my intent towards them, that I know that they're on the right track, they're doing some really amazing stuff, and that too in an area which is empowering the ecosystem into women healthcare and hygiene products, right? And the second one is starkly different. This is an emerging technology, quantum computing, and the startup that I've invested in is called Boson Q Psi, which is a SaaS, which has developed a SaaS suite of products into simulation engineering for auto industry, aerospace, and energy. But instead of utilizing CPUs and GPUs for compute, they have got quantum computing there, right? And that is where it's powering the companies to do a lot more computing a lot faster. And the impact is twofold. One is the business impact, which is that companies who are trying to launch products have to do a lot of simulation engineering to ensure that they can launch with a certain amount of safety net there, right, for the consumers. Now these guys are able to generate or shorten the GTM very, very to a small number, so that companies can launch products a lot faster with changes, with incremental changes, with disruptive changes as well. But at the same time, the accuracy of the safety aspect comes into picture, which is a lot stronger, which is why it's safer for consumers, right? So I think these are dual-pronged approach that kind of created.
I look forward to meeting these two companies. I look forward to meeting these two. I want you to quickly talk about what will happen in the startup ecosystem next 2 years. The burn really upsets. We've all seen it. Hiring for the right reasons apparently, and then firing right immediately. We all hear about it daily. It's like they're playing with people's lives. This has never happened at such unprecedented scale in India, right? Your thoughts on the burn and the ecosystem quickly and where it's heading, and then we'll close the podcast.
Sure. So, firstly, Vishal, I don't need a Y Combinator or a Sequoia to tell me as to what is going to happen in India. So, I feel that there's a market frenzy versus something that's happening in real. Now, I don't think that any investor, and again, I'm making a very bold statement, any investor who understands that there are bear and bull markets would have ever advised their founders to go on a crazy spending or burning spree, right? You always focus on unit economics, you always focus on sustainability. You expect the companies to grow, and for that, there's marketing spend, but it is not a burn. The reason it's called burn these days is because now you are getting into the habit of spending crazy without really calculating the ROI on that, right? And without thinking about, the whole thought process is let's build the moat on the number of consumers rather than the value addition to those consumers. When that mindset changes back to the value addition to the consumers, which is now supposedly all the messages that we are getting, hey, we need to now relook at unit economics. We need to look at how do we create value rather than burn. This was always the case. I mean, any senior investor would have said the same thing to their portfolio companies that, hey, listen, think about value creation rather than moat on the number of users, right? So when you think about that, then, there is nothing wrong. And I think, yes, there's certain companies, large startups, who went overboard in doing that, and they've ended up letting go a lot of people. I think my advice to some of my portfolio companies who I thought that this is applicable to is that, hey, listen, don't cut corners. Take a very calculated, phased-wise approach on where do you think you can offset unnecessary costs. That doesn't mean that you hire and fire. That means that if you were taking a business class trip to US to present at CES Las Vegas, then take an economy trip, or instead of going to 10 conferences, think about growth hacks in which you can go to only 3 or 4 of them, offset that cost and utilize that towards product development or product enhancement. So I think for me, it's a matter of different reports stating different things, but I think this will all balance out over the next few months.
That's a fair point. My last question to you: what's your secret guide to happiness in 30 seconds, not more? And recommend us a few books. It need not be startup books. It can be anything that you picked up in your life. Go for it.
Sure. So happiness for me would mean acceptance of your role in life. People on most days are not able to accept what their role is in the larger environment, right? And that is why they're always unhappy. The day you accept who you are and what you need to do for the society, be as a scientist or someone else, you understand that there's a journey to take, and the journey is what will keep you satisfied by the end of it. So that, I think, acceptance is the most important thing for satisfaction. Have I achieved it? No, not yet, but I think the journey would be satisfying towards the end.
Okay, now books, please.
Books, I think, I've not been into reading too many books of late. Somehow I've not been able to get
What inspires you? What inspires you? Tell me that.
I think science fiction, right? Science fiction always inspires me because being in innovation, there's always that sense of reading science fiction, and science fiction with real hypothesis, right? With scientific data points, which also amalgamates imagination.
Yeah, you said it. Science fiction's role is to build imagination. Absolutely. Any particular science fiction that you'd recommend?
Hieroglyph.
Okay, that's the one that you'd recommend. Is that a series? I've not read it or seen it. Is that a series?
No, it's a book by scientists who have written science fiction. So
I look forward to that.
They've not focused it 200 years from now. A touch of a button changes everything. It says it talks about a science fiction of future 20, 25 years from now, so that at least you can relate with that and think about what this imagination could be, right? And very, very subtly changing the way you look at things. So yeah.
I'll buy it. And ladies and gentlemen, the future is here today, at least for Abhay Tandon. He's the head of innovation and AI at TVS Motor Company. I enjoyed talking to him. Do let me know if you enjoyed this conversation. Write to me on the Upstream Life. Okay, it's Vishal at theupstreamlife.com. And I'll get him to answer all your questions. Perhaps I have him back on a panel with a panel of enablers and people who've really done good stuff for the startup world. Thank you, Abhay, for supporting me. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Vishal. Thank you for having me here.